Have you ever noticed how quiet people get when you begin to change? Not the loud kind of change, the quiet kind. The kind where your posture shifts slightly, where your replies become shorter, where you no longer rush to fill every silence or soothe every tension. Suddenly your presence becomes unfamiliar to the ones who once knew you best. They don't say it aloud, but something in them recoils. Because when you begin to grow, really grow, it's not your happiness they resent. It's your detachment. It's your stillness. It's the way you no longer dance to the rhythm they expect. The truth is, most people aren't afraid of your failure. They're afraid of your evolution, because growth exposes stagnation. Your refusal to engage in the same patterns shines a quiet spotlight on their refusal to leave them. You don't need to criticize them for them to feel judged. Your shift in energy is already a confrontation. It tells them, without saying a word, that you're no longer playing the same game. And when you stop playing, you stop validating the roles they've built their identity on. This is why growth feels like loss, because it is. You will lose familiarity. You will lose shared illusions. You will lose the comfort of being understood by those who never truly saw you. But in that loss, something sacred begins. You start to see who you are without the mirrors of others. You start to breathe in your own rhythm, and for the first time, you realize that maybe you were never difficult. Maybe you were just evolving in a world that needs you to stay small, to feel safe. They don't tell you that awakening feels like grief, that the moment you begin to see clearly is the moment you also begin to lose. You lose the comfort of certainty. You lose the illusion of safety. You lose the soothing rhythm of groupthink, the kind that once told you who you were and how to stay loved. At first, growth feels like death, not because you are dying, but because the mask is. And the ones who only knew you behind that mask, they start to disappear with it. Awakening is not a sunrise. It is a rupture, a break, a tearing away from the identity you were praised for but never felt at home in. You begin to speak differently, move differently, want differently, and the world, sensing that you've become harder to control, responds with withdrawal, with silence, with subtle punishment. The people who once applauded your self-sacrifice now call you difficult. The systems that rewarded your obedience now call you a threat. This is the price of waking up. Clarity without comfort. Truth without applause. It is here that strength becomes loneliness. You sit in a space between lives, no longer asleep, not yet fully free. And you begin to understand why so many choose to go back to pretending. Why so many chase awakening until it costs them something real. Because awakening does not offer belonging, it offers liberation, and liberation demands the courage to be misunderstood, to be alone, to keep walking even when the applause stops. That is the price, and that is the path. You are taught to fear chaos, to see it as failure, as collapse, as something to avoid or overcome. But Nietzsche saw what most never do, that a dancing star is not born in the comfort of stillness. It is born from internal catastrophe, from the moment when everything familiar begins to dissolve, when the ground no longer feels solid beneath your feet. That's when the soul begins to shape itself, not in the quiet, in the quake. You don't need calm. You need the storm that forces you to choose, the kind of chaos that strips you down until all that remains is your will to continue. because only in the clash between what you were and what you could be does your real power take form. The caterpillar doesn't become the butterfly through peace. It becomes by disintegration, and so do you. The breakdown is not your end. It is your beginning, and if you resist it, you stay small, safe, silent. The strongest minds are not built in silence. They are forged in storms, not the kind outside, but the kind inside, where your illusions scream and your truths emerge, one shard at a time. When the chaos comes, don't run, don't numb, don't hide. Sit in the fire. Let it burn away what no longer belongs to you. Because the fire is not your enemy. The fire is your forge. God is dead. Most people quote Nietzsche without understanding the grief behind the words. He wasn't celebrating, he was mourning. Because when the sky goes silent, when the divine hand withdraws, you are left not with freedom, but with responsibility. It's not liberation, it's confrontation, with a world that no longer tells you what to do, who to be, or why any of it matters. And in that void, your real self must emerge. Not the obedient one, not the good one, the sovereign one. You may think you want freedom, but freedom comes with no instruction manual, no finish line, no moral pat on the head. You can no longer blame a god. You can no longer wait for fate. You become the architect, the guardian, the destroyer. Every belief you hold must now be chosen, not inherited. Every value must be built from within, not handed to you. This is not comfortable. This is not easy. This is the silent weight of self-authorship, and most cannot bear it. But if you can, something changes. When there is no one left to save you, you become capable of saving yourself. When there is no fixed meaning, you begin to create meaning, not as a doctrine, but as a daily act of courage. That is true autonomy, not the ability to do whatever you want, but the ability to choose your path without needing permission. You are no longer a follower. You are the flame, and every step forward is a step away from comfort and toward truth. The Übermensch is not a superhero. He is not loud. He does not seek attention. He is not a rebel for show. He is the one who no longer waits for validation, who no longer bends to the smallness of collective fear. He does not adapt to the world. He reshapes it with the force of his will. He does not soften his voice so others feel comfortable. He speaks what is true, even when that truth isolates him. The overman is not above others in worth. He is beyond them in courage. To become him is not to rise. It is to rupture, to tear yourself away from every place that demands you shrink, from every identity offered to you in exchange for belonging. It is to accept to exile, to know that you will be misunderstood and still walk forward without explanation, to stand firm in your own mythos, even when the crowd insists you are wrong. This is not arrogance. This is freedom, the kind of freedom that does not ask. It declares. The Übermensch does not argue with the asleep. He does not wait for permission to live fully. He understands that the cost of sovereignty is loneliness, and he pays it willingly, because he knows this. The cage is not made of iron. It is made of comfort, of approval, of smallness disguised as virtue. And so he shatters it, not with violence but with presence, and in doing so, he becomes a mirror too bright to ignore. Not everyone will understand him, but those who are ready will awaken. They will say you've changed, that you're distant now, that you think you're better, but they will never see the truth. You are simply no longer dependent on being understood. The more conscious you become, the more silence becomes your companion. not because you're bitter, but because you're clear. You no longer entertain the noise that once gave you a false sense of identity. You no longer contort to stay in conversations that cost you your center. And so, you begin to walk alone, not because you were cast out, but because you rose beyond reach. Solitude is not a punishment. It is a reward, a quiet badge of those who no longer barter truth for comfort. You do not isolate yourself out of fear. You choose the higher path out of necessity. Because when you become unbreakable, you also become rare, and the air is thin where the rare reside. Nietzsche once said that great men are necessarily strange, alone, misunderstood. But what he meant was this: once you possess yourself, you stop needing to be possessed by others. That is not loneliness. That is liberation. You will notice it in the pauses, the ease in your own company, the calm that comes from not chasing approval like a thirst. You no longer need applause to validate your movement, no longer need constant echoes to know your voice matters. You begin to trust the silence, to make it your temple, because in that stillness you discover the one relationship that was always waiting for you to return to yourself. And once you have that, no exile can shake you. No absence can undo you. You are not alone. You are sovereign. The true war is rarely waged from the top. It festers at eye level in the subtle pressure to shrink, conform, and settle. It comes in the form of quiet scorn when you speak with clarity, in the sideways glances when you refuse to dilute your brilliance to fit someone else's comfort. The crowd does not need to chain you. It only needs to convince you that standing tall is selfish, that wanting more is arrogance, that daring to be excellent is a threat. And when you believe that, they've already won. Mediocrity is not a failure. It is a virus. It spreads through silent agreements and unspoken resentments. It tells you that playing small is noble, that endurance is virtue, that disempowerment is humility. This is what Nietzsche called slave morality, a morality that praises weakness because it fears power. In this world, to be strong is to be accused. To be sovereign is to be cast as cold. To be unapologetic is to be framed as cruel. But cruelty is not your sin. Your only crime is refusing to betray your potential for someone else's comfort. You are not too much. You are simply surrounded by those who chose to be less. And when you rise, their illusions tremble, because your existence dares to prove that the cage was never locked. You don't need to fight them. You don't need to explain. You only need to continue forward, eyes clear, voice steady, soul intact. Let them talk. Let them point. Let them project. But never ever let them shrink you. The world may try to punish your light, but it cannot dim what it does not control. The truly free mind doesn't waste energy on reaction. It observes. It calculates. It chooses. While the world yells, the sovereign one sketches. While others beg to be heard, the rare one waits until every word becomes a weapon, and every silence a boundary. Strength is not measured by resistance alone. Strength is creation. It is the power to envision a new world while standing unshaken in the wreckage of the old. It is not loud. It is not desperate. It simply moves, quietly, deliberately, without apology. Silence is not a retreat. It is compression, power drawn inward until it becomes impenetrable. Withdrawal is not surrender. It is the refusal to leak energy where none will return. Vision is not fantasy. It is a dangerous clarity that blinds those who live in illusion. These are not coping mechanisms, they are weapons, and the one who masters them cannot be baited, cannot be cornered, cannot be controlled. You become what the system cannot track. Unpredictable, original, sovereign. You are no longer reactive. You are selective. You do not shout because you do not need to. You do not fight because you do not need to prove. You see every slight, every manipulation, every provocation for what it is, a test of your composure, and in your stillness, you pass. This is not the silence of fear. It is the silence of strategy, the quiet strength of someone who no longer asks for respect because they have become the kind of presence that demands it. Without a single word, clarity does not come gently. It arrives like a blade, cutting through illusions, severing ties, and leaving you face to face with what was always true beneath the noise. You will lose people, not because you changed, but because you finally saw through the performance. You will outgrow the friendships that thrived on your compliance, the masks that earned you approval, and the version of yourself that needed to be liked in order to feel real. Clarity is not kind, it is honest, and once you see, you cannot unsee. You will feel the ache of distance, the space left behind by those who only loved your echo. You will grieve the roles you played, the rooms you shrank to fit into, the time you spent trying to belong to places your soul never called home. But in this shedding, in this quiet death of falsehood, something new begins to emerge. Not comfort, not applause, but presence. A presence that does not need to explain, prove, or bend. A presence that stands, even when standing alone. This is the true reward of awakening, not dominance over others, but sovereignty within yourself. You no longer walk into rooms seeking safety. You bring it with you. You no longer need to speak to be heard. Your clarity becomes its own kind of gravity. You attract only what respects your boundaries and lose what never did. This is the price of becoming unshakable, and it is worth everything you had to let go of. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to awaken, and awakening, by its nature, disturbs. It rattles comfort. It unsettles certainty. It reveals the cracks beneath the surface that others work so hard to ignore. Your very presence, clear, grounded, unswayed, is not neutral. It is an earthquake, and those who have built their lives on illusion will feel it long before you say a word. Let them call you intense. Let them say you've changed. What they're really saying is that your existence now holds a mirror to the fog they've made home. And mirrors are dangerous, not because they harm, but because they reflect. You don't need to preach, persuade, or provoke. Just stand in your truth. Just live in your clarity. That alone is enough to unravel entire systems built on sleep. If you've made it this far, you're not just watching. You're transforming. This isn't curiosity anymore. It's a return to the self you were before the world told you who to be. And from here, there is no going back. Let the ground shake. Let the dust rise. What emerges on the other side is not just a new life, but a new self, one that will not be forgotten, one that will not be moved. And remember, the next video picks up where we left off here. Awakening builds upon each video. See you in the next one.